Good day! For today's session, we will be learning about Egyptian literature. So we all know and recognize Egypt for its pyramids and its significance in the early civilizations of mankind. Besides the archaeological landmarks present in Egypt, its history and literature imposes interesting ideas that is significant to us in the modern times. First and foremost, we will be discussing the geography and the demography of Egypt. The official name of the country is Jumhuriyet Saudi Arabia, or Arab Republic of Egypt. Egypt is located in the northern eastern part of Africa, and the official language of Egypt is Arabic, and its official religion is Islam. As you can see, Egypt's official language and religion differs to what is commonly depicted in mainstream media. This is a result of the country's history with colonization, which we will tackle later on. The capital of Egypt is Cairo, and the country's population as of 2022 is 104,239,000. Moving forward, we will be heading to the historical background of Egypt. Enclosed within this part is a simplified timeline of the history of Egypt. Particularly, this focuses on the periods which provided a huge influence to the literature of the country. First, we have the Pharaonic period. Egypt was a home to the thriving ancient civilizations that were first known to man. It has a Pharaonic period in which a country led by pharaohs thrived for approximately 3,000 years. Several native dynasties emerged under this period until the conquest of Alexander the Great. Next, we have the conquest of Alexander the Great and the Greek Ptolemaic dynasty. In 336 BCE, the young king Alexander the Great waged a political campaign in the northeastern Africa and southwest Asia. Egypt was one of the places he conquered, hence why there is a place named Alexandria in Egypt. This place is named after Alexander the Great. Due to this conquest, the Greek Ptolemaic dynasty began, and Egypt became the avenue of an advanced literate society. This is where the infamous Library of Alexandria was situated, and the library is said to contain archives on philosophy, Greek literature, religions, and languages. After the Greek Ptolemaic dynasty, we have the Roman conquest and the Byzantine Empire. In 30 BCE, the Romans conquered Egypt. This conquest turned Egypt into a Roman Empire. After a while, the Romans dissolved their control and had a successor, which was the Byzantine Empire. The power in Egypt was then transferred to this empire until the Muslim conquest. The Muslim conquest occurred in 639 to 642 CE. The Arab Muslims have conquered Egypt at this time. As a consequence to this, the Egyptian language has been taken over by the Arabic language, hence why the official language of Egypt to this day is still Arabic. Many of the rural and urban cultures adapted to Arabian practices and cultural elements over time. With this, Egypt became the intellectual and cultural centers for Arabs and the Islamic world. Following that is the French occupation. In 1798, Napoleon I led the conquest in Egypt, and the French occupied the country until 1801. This part of history did not eradicate much of the established Arabian influences in Egypt. However, it did introduce Egypt for more European involvement, especially in the area of commerce, meaning to say, the country of Egypt became more open to trade with other countries in Europe, such as United Kingdom and other English-speaking nations. With the exchange of trade of goods and services, this increased the influence of European countries to Egypt in terms of languages and most probably literature. In 1869, the Suez Canal was opened to make the increasing numbers of trades of the country with other continents and nations more convenient. Now that we're done with the historical background of Egypt, we will now be moving forward to the periods of Egyptian literature. Egypt is known for its extremely rich history and culture. As a matter of fact, Egyptians are known for having hieroglyphics, which is an old system of pictorial alphabet. However, there are specific areas in history where different forms of literature thrived in the country of Egypt. First, within the periods of Egyptian literature is the early dynastic literature, which occurred in 6000 to 3150 BCE. Many of the themes tackled in the pieces released under this period centered on the dead. During this time, the list of offerings and autobiographies of different individuals was the form of literature that people at that time indulged in. So, during this time, this most probably existed alongside the pharaonic period of history. Meaning to say, the people are still focused on making mummies and worshipping their pharaohs. Going back to the autobiographies, these are structured in the forms of poetry. One example of which is the inscription of Nefer-Seshemra called Seshi. This inscription reads, "I have come from my town, I have descended from my nome. I have done justice for its Lord. I have satisfied with what he loves. I spoke truly, I did right. I spoke fairly, I repeated fairly. I seized the right moment, so as to stand as well with people. I judged between two, so as to content them. I rescued the weak from the stronger than he, as much as was in my power. I gave bread to the hungry, clothes to the naked. I brought the boatless to land. I buried him who had no son. I made a boat for him who lacked one. I respected my father. I pleased my mother. I raised their children." So says he whose nickname is Seshi. If we would analyze this poem, this is simply an autobiography of a man named Seshi, in which he recounts the times and the good deeds that he has done all through his life before he finally perished. Moving forward, we have the Middle Kingdom literature, which occurred in 2040 to 1782 BCE. The classical age of Egyptian literature happened in the period of Middle Kingdom. There are several works that are recognized to be from this time. These are the dispute between a man and his spa, the eloquent peasant, the satire of the trades, the instruction of King Amenemhet I to his son Senseret I, the prophecies of Nefertiti, and the admonitions of Ipuwer. The dispute between a man and his ba is recorded as the oldest text about suicide in this world. This story depicts as a conversation between a man's soul and the man himself. The conversation circled on the man's soul, reminding him of the goodness of life and the goodness of the gods. After that, we have the New Kingdom literature, which occurred in 1782 to 1570 BCE. During this period, a lot of political turmoil was happening in Egypt, hence the focus of literature hasn't changed that much. As a matter of fact, literature still focused on religions and the gods. Most of the commonly written pieces of literature in the New Kingdom were hymns, love poems, and prayers. There are two works known from this period. These are The Prince Who Was Threatened by the Three Fates and The Two Brothers. The Two Brothers depicts a story of two divine siblings, Anubis and Bata. Bata lived with Anubis' wife and Anubis. The woman tried to seduce Bata, but due to his loyalty to his brother, the young god refused, keeping his honor. The woman was distraught about the rejection, hence she lied to Anubis and said that it was Bata who was seducing her, instead of the other way around, where she was the one trying to seduce Bata and tempt him to be with her and betray his brother. Anubis got mad and he tried to kill Bata, but the young god was lucky enough to be warned by the gods. The wife caused more trouble for the siblings, but in the end, she was still punished and the two brothers were brought back together. They reconciled. Moving forward, we have the modern day literature, which occurred in the 20th to the 21st century. The modern day literature of Egypt differs greatly from the previous periods. Egypt's literature widened in terms of scope. From just focusing on the gods and religion, Egypt now embraces topics of political, social, geographical, and cultural topics. Poetry and prose are heavily appreciated in this country. Meaning to say, in terms of scope and what writers now do and embrace in terms of topics and forms of literature, Egyptian literature flourished greatly like other countries in the world. Meaning to say, we can now have papers and stories that tackles the political climate of Egypt. Unlike before, we are very focused on gods and fictional stories about how they value loyalty and moral and ethical lessons coming from the gods. Much like other nations, Egypt has its own Nobel Prize winner. Naguib Mahfouz won a Nobel Prize in Literature in 1988. He wrote novels, short stories, journalist articles, memoir, essays, and screenplays. Mahfouz's most famous work is the Cairo Trilogy. In the modern terms, the genre of this work is slice of life. Mainly fiction, it focuses on the life of a man and his family and the generation that followed them. It provided an insight on the changes of one's domestic life and the national transitions occurring in Cairo, Egypt. So if we would define it in terms of what scope of topic does it embrace, we could say that this is most probably cultural and political. That is all. Thank you so much for listening and have a great day.